All right, it's January 17th, 2025. Let's jump right in. So what happened this week in Chicago? The big news united everyone from the left to the right, to transit activists, to urbanists, to really everyone in Chicago was just thrilled this week that Mr. Dorval Carter, the CEO of the CTA, the Transit Association, stepped down today. The Twitter account that I follow, the Is Dorval Carter Fired Yet Twitter account, which every day just tweets no, was very disappointed that he wasn't fired, but he did step down. He's taking a $750,000 a year hospital CEO job. Somehow that's a normal transition, but he will no longer be the CEO of the CTA. He basically got the funds for the Red Line extension down south, the federal funds, $2 billion or so, and then had a celebratory press conference last week, if you remember from last week, and then rode off into the sunset. His chief of staff is now the interim CEO, which means that there is no permanent leader of the CTA or CPS or the Public Housing Authority in Chicago. And so not a ton of leadership at the top right now. The other giant news this week in Chicago was unfortunately not great news. The S&P, which rates organizations on how risky they are to loan to and how creditworthy they are, from cities to companies to other things. They downgraded the city of Chicago after warning that it would do so back in December if the city chose to go forward with Brandon Johnson's budget, which it ended up doing, and the S&P made good on its threat and downgraded Chicago. This is very bad. We've had a couple of upgrades in the last couple of years because the city has elected to proactively pay down more of its debt than it has had to by law, and so it's basically getting ahead of the game. It got some credit from the ratings agencies for doing so, like getting extra credit. Essentially, we look a little bit better, a little bit less risky because we've done it. And then this budget came along and kind of turned that around. So what that does, because we're riskier to loan to, it makes our cities, our interest that we have to pay on our debt as a city higher. And so more of our budget has to go each year to just paying interest on our debt than it did before, meaning less of it can go to actual services. More of it has to go to servicing the debt. So that was bad, and that was really big news. And then the day after, literally the day after, I think the mayor may have had an announcement like automatically go out by accident. They didn't realize that it was going to be timed this way. But the day after, they announced that they wanted to raise it this year, or maybe leading into next year, they want to raise $830 million more in debt as a city, which the day after a national ratings agency says, sorry, you are not as creditworthy as you were before, is about as big a cell phone as you can do. So that was big news. If you remember Susana Mendoza from last week, she's the comptroller. She is clearly going to be mayor, to run for mayor, and she just keeps lighting into Brandon Johnson every single week. So did Alexis Giannoulias, whose name I can't really pronounce. He is the Illinois Secretary of State. He is also probably going to be he's talked about as a possible front runner as well. He also lit into the Johnson administration this week over the debt fiasco. And if you may know him as online as the basically very hot Illinois Secretary of State. He's, I think, at the Gay Pride Parade, he had very he won a wet t-shirt contest sort of thing. I don't know the exact specifics of it, but that's him. So you might see him in the news in the next year or two. All right, I got about a minute left. CTU contract discussions have not really gone anywhere since last week. However, the CTU president, Stacey Gates, who was very controversial, it came out that she compared the CPS CEO, who, remember, the CTU was fighting with and through Brandon Johnson got fired essentially. She compared him to an IEP student who couldn't be suspended because he's an IEP student. That caused a shitstorm. She apologized publicly, and then it later came out that she had actually done the same thing, the same sort of comparison with Kanye West a couple years ago. So yeah, not a great look for CTU. There was also this week a city council proposal that was put forth and is being considered now to ban being mayor while being employed by an agency that the city does business with. That's obviously directed at the mayor. I don't think it'll pass, but it just shows how much kind of acrimony is flying around. All right, real quick. This is good news, there were only 24 bird deaths flying into McCormick Place in 2024 after 1,200 in 2023 after McCormick Place put up a special film to prevent birds from flying into it. So that's good news. One of the electric utilities in Illinois announced that it is gearing up for a Department of Energy grant to build what's called a small modular reactor, a small nuclear reactor plant in Illinois. That's very good for Chicago because almost all of our electricity is nuclear already, meaning clean energy and very cheap clean energy already. And so our energy will get even cheaper and even cleaner if that happens. The United Center, the owners of the Blackhawks and the Bulls announced that they have, the city approved their plans to develop the area around the United Center. It's a $7 billion plan. It'll probably happen over 10 or 15 years, possibly even longer, but it got approved. So they're going to start hopefully soon if they have the funding. We'll see if they have the funding, but kind of far west loop could fairly dramatically change in the relatively near future. The 25 mile per hour speed limit that I mentioned last week was going to be voted on this week, but it got pulled at the last minute because it seems like they don't have the votes for it, so you can continue driving 30 miles per hour. The sanctuary city law change that I mentioned last week, someone proposed making it easier for police to basically cooperate with ICE in Chicago. That was shot down as it was expected to, pretty significantly so. But it did spur more conversation in city council as to how the city's going to stop Trump from coming in and doing what he's saying anyways in the next couple of years. So that's gotten people a little stressed out, as it should. What else? Brandon Johnson announced that he had only raised $900 in campaign funds in the fourth quarter of 2024, which would be by far the least amount of money that any mayor has ever raised in probably the history of big cities. They later came out and said, no, we raised way more than that, which made it clear that they had almost certainly broken campaign finance laws by not declaring whatever those contributions were. So either way, not a great look. What else? You may have heard, I'm at 8 minutes now. No one's watching this, I'm just talking at myself. You may have heard of ShotSpotter. There's a technology, basically cameras and audio, that they put up on poles in various parts of Chicago to listen for gunshots so that they can send to the police so they can get there quickly when it happens. Mayor Johnson nixed that program very controversially last year, but now it looks like there is, for some reason, a competitor to the ShotSpotter tool being tested out. So it may come back in a slightly different form after a very controversial fight against it. So it's unclear why his administration is doing that, but it seems to be happening. And that's all I got for this week. Thank you for probably just me listening, but over and out. See you next week.